Hello, brothers and sisters. What a wonderful day it is to gather together and study the Word of God. I welcome you all to join me in an expedition of Through the Bible. As we have discussed in our last episode, we all belong to one big family. God developed the whole human race through Noah, and despite our differences, we all share the same blood. Yet, what is most interesting to know is that Christ chose to be born as a human being through the line of Shem and sacrificed himself so that all of mankind be saved. And I know that no one is as brave enough to sacrifice himself or herself for the sins of all humans. But before we discuss Christ's sacrifice as further, let's quickly recap what we learned in our previous episode. First, we trace the roots of the various races found across the whole world back to Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Secondly, we discussed how man tried to make a name for himself instead of glorifying God. We realized that man continued to reject and rebelled against God, for he is convinced that he is intelligent and more than capable enough to live by himself and does not need any help from the Creator. But most importantly, he claims to be as powerful as God and tries to rule over the earth by setting his own rules, thereby rejecting God's commands. And finally, we observe that man continued to rebel against God through his construction of the Tower of Babel. We know that through Ham, Shem, and Japheth, God built the entire human race. But do you know why and how he scattered us? Why do we speak in different languages when we come from the same family? Do you know how they originated and developed into the languages we speak today? And can you name them all? The quest to identify and preserve languages have been in progress for centuries. And yet, in the process, several of them were lost and can never be retrieved. God allowed the extinction of some languages for a reason, and unless He reveals it to us, we will never be able to decipher them to our own. The first phase in the book of Genesis is about to end, and a new one will take shape. So let us return to the Tower of Babel and witness the various changes that God is about to make.
Welcome, dear friends, to the study of Genesis. We are looking at Nimrod and the consequences of his tower. Let's continue. Notice what God did. Genesis 11, 7-9. Let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build a city. Therefore, in the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Now man is scattered over the face of the earth. They were together in their rebellion, but now they can't understand one another. You know, a language barrier is a wall that is higher than the wall of China. It is higher than the Berlin Wall and more effective. It is that which separates people, and it is stronger than any national border and any ocean. There are many who say that language is developed gradually, but God said He confounded their language so that right then, while they were building, they suddenly couldn't understand each other. The building project came to a sudden halt and folk moved away from Babel. They went in every direction. This is a tremendous thing that took place. Here is a speaking in tongues when they couldn't understand each other. It is a miracle of speaking and a miracle of hearing. They spoke different languages, and those who heard could not understand them. Let me ask you a question. Was this a blessing in disguise, or was it a curse upon mankind? Well, for God's purpose, it was a blessing. For man's development away from God, it was definitely a judgment. Down through the centuries, mankind has been kept separate, and it has been a great hindrance to Him. One thing that is happening today through the medium of radio, television, and jet travel is that these walls are being broken down. They are tumbling down like the walls of Jericho. This is one reason that I believe God is coming down in judgment again. Now let's put over against this tongue movement those events of the day of Pentecost. That was another great tongues movement, and that time we find that the gospel was preached in all the languages that were understood by the people there. This was not speaking in an unknown tongue. That never was involved in the tongues movement to begin with. On the day of Pentecost, God is giving his answer to the Tower of Babel. God is saying to mankind, I have a gospel and a message for you, and I'm coming with the gospel in your own language. This is the thing that God has done, and today the Bible has gone out in more languages than any other book. It is still being translated into tongues and dialects and is being brought to literally hundreds of tribes throughout the world. The gospel is for all mankind, and the reason and the purpose for the talking in tongues was to let the human race know that God had answered the Tower of Babel. He had a redemption for man now. The mission has been accomplished. It is no longer necessary for man to try to work out his salvation. He can listen to God's message and turn to him. The gospel is for you. Whoever you are and whatever tongue you speak, it's for you. It's for all the nations of the world. We are told in the final book of the Bible that there will be gathered into his presence a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindred and people and tongues. Revelation 7:9. From Shem to Abraham. Now we will take up the line of Shem, since it is the line which will be followed throughout the Old Testament. Genesis 11:10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Shem's genealogy is given in the following verses. Then we read in Genesis 11:24-25, And Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived again, he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. You see that we are following the line of Terah. Why Terah? Notice the next verse. Genesis 11:26. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now we are going to follow the line of Abram, whom we know as Abraham. We're following the line of Shem, and we're actually going right through the Bible following this line. The Word of God will follow this line directly to the cross of Christ. As preliminary, God now has demonstrated to man that he is in sin. In the incident of Cain and Abel, we find that Cain would acknowledge that he was a sinner. In him we see a demonstration of the pride of life. At the flood we see the sin of the flesh, because the people there were given over to the sins of the flesh. They were indulging in violence, and their every thought and imagination was evil. They were blind to their need of God. They were deaf to his claim, dead to God, dead in trespasses and sins. God gave them an invitation through Noah. They spurned the invitation and remained in the sins of the flesh. Then, here at the Tower of Babel, we see the sin of the will, rebellion against God. That was the Tower of Babel. Do you have your own little Tower of Babel, which you have built? Are you in rebellion against God? Well, it is natural for human nature to be in rebellion against God. Little Willie was being very cantankerous one evening. He was really cutting up, and his mother was having a great deal of trouble with him. Finally, she had to get him and put him in a corner, sat him down with his face to the wall, and told him to sit there. She left him and went back to the living room with the rest of the family. After a while, she heard a noise in there, and she called to him. Willie, are you standing up? He said, No, Mom, I'm sitting down, and I'm standing up on the inside of me. Well, believe me, there are a lot of men and women in our day who are standing up on the inside of them, standing against God. They have built their own little Tower of Babel. Now, as we follow the line, which is going to lead to Christ, here are the generations or the families of Terah. Genesis 11:27-31. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran began Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Ishka. But Sarai was barren, she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees, to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran, and dwelt there. The name Haran means delay. Genesis 11:32. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. This bit of history is given to let us know that we are going to follow Abraham, and his story will begin in the next chapter. It is at this point that the book of Genesis, and for that matter the Bible as a whole, takes a turn. There is a great canyon which goes right down through the book of Genesis. The first 11 chapters on one side, the last 39 chapters are on the other side. In the first 11 chapters we cover over 2000 years, as long as a period as the rest of the Bible put together. Contrast that 2000 with the 350 years from Genesis 12 through 50. In these first 11 chapters of Genesis, we have seen the creation, the fall of man, the flood, and the Tower of Babel. These are the 4 great events which covered that long span of years. Chapter 12. The chapter before us brings us to the other side of the Grand Canyon, which runs through Genesis. The atmosphere is altogether different here, and we are going to slow down to a walk. The emphasis turns from events, stupendous events, to personalities. Not all of them were great, but all of them were important personalities. In Genesis, there are 4, and others will follow in subsequent books of the Bible. In the first 11 chapters, we have seen 4 great events: the creation, the fall of man, the flood, and the Tower of Babel. In all these tremendous events, God has been dealing with the human race as a whole. Other than Adam and Abraham, God did not appear to anyone else. God was dealing with the entire race of mankind. There is a radical change at chapter 12. Now there will be brought before us 4 individuals. God will no longer be dealing with events, but with a man. And from that man, he will make a nation. In the first section, we will see Abraham, the man of faith, Genesis 12 to 23. Then there will be Isaac, the beloved son, from Genesis 24 to 26. Next, there will be Jacob, the chosen and chastened son, Genesis 27 to 36. And then there will be Joseph's suffering and glory, Genesis 37 to 50. These 4 patriarchs are extremely important to the understanding of the Word of God. We will be taking up their stories in the rest of the book of Genesis. You see, God has demonstrated that He can no longer deal with the race. After the fall of man, we see the great sin of Cain. That was his great sin, pride. He was angry because of the fact that deep down in his heart he was proud of the offering he had brought to God. And when his offering was rejected, while his brother's was accepted, it caused him to hate his brother. His hatred led to murder, and the root of all of it was pride. Let me remind you that pride was also Satan's sin. Pride is the sin of the mind. Then at the time of the flood, the sin was the lust of the flesh. We saw that the actions and even the imaginations of man were to satisfy the flesh. God had to bring the flood to judge man at the time He did, because there was only one believer left, Noah. If God had waited even another generation, He would have lost the entire human race. God had certainly been patient with the world. He had waited 969 years, the entire lifespan of Methuselah. I am confident that you would say that 969 years is long enough to give anybody an opportunity to change his mind. But instead of turning to God, the people were in open rebellion, asserting a will that was against God. Following the flood, the Tower of Babel reveals that none seeketh after God. After the Tower of Babel, God turns from the race of mankind to one individual. From that individual, He is going to bring a nation, and to that nation He will give His revelation. And out of that nation He will bring the Redeemer. Apparently, this is the only way that God could do it. Or let me put it like this. If there were other ways, this was the best way. We can trust God to do the thing which is the best. When God chose Abraham, He chose a man of faith. Abraham, by any person's measuring rod, is a great man. He is one of the greatest men who ever lived on this earth. How do you measure great men even today? Well, to begin with, the man has to be famous. And certainly Abraham measures up to that. He is probably the world's most famous man. Even in this day of radio, television, internet, probably more people have heard of Abraham than anyone else. More have heard of Abraham than I've heard of the President of the United States, or any head of state, or any movie star, or an athlete. The 3 great religions of the world go back to Abraham: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. There are literally millions of people in Asia and Africa today who have heard of Abraham, but have never heard of the ones who make the headlines in the country. Another mark of a great man is that he must be of noble character, a generous man. Can you imagine anyone more generous than Abraham? I doubt whether there is a man alive who would do what he did. When he and his nephew came back into the land of Palestine, he told Lot to choose any portion that he wanted, and Abraham said he would take what was left. Do you think any man would do that in business deal today? They don't even do that in a church, friend, much less in a hard-boiled business world. But Abraham was a generous man. Have you ever noticed how generous he was with the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah? He told them he wouldn't take the booty, not even so much as a shoestring, because God was the one to whom he was looking. Thirdly, a great man must live in a momentous time. He must be, as Napoleon said, a man of destiny. The man and the right time must meet at the crossroads of life. That was certainly true of Abraham. I believe the world would agree with me on the first 3 points we have mentioned. They might not agree with this one. The fourth essential of a great man is that he must be a man of faith. You will notice that all great men, even when they are not Christian, have something in which they believe. God said that Abraham was a man of faith. In the Bible record, the greatest thing that is said about Abraham is that he believed God. Abraham believed God and was counted unto him righteousness. Romans 4:3. As we go through these chapters in Genesis, we will find that God appeared to this man 7 times, each time to develop faith in his life. This does not mean that he was perfect. The fact of the matter is that he failed many times. God gave him 4 tests, and he fell flat on his face on all 4 of them. But like Simon Peter, he got up, brushed himself off, and started again. May I say to you, if God has touched your heart and life, you also may fall. But you are surely going to get up and start over again. We will see this happen in Abraham's life as we go through the chapter before us. Let's close here, dear friends. God bless you till we meet next time.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed today's study of Through the Bible. I hope that you have finally understood that the different languages we speak today were created by God and not by any man. God made man an intellectual being, but instead of thanking Him, we try to take on the role of God and claim for ourselves as the creators and inventors of everything. We tend to forget that it is God who puts those innovative ideas in our minds. We tend to forget our Creator and tend to believe that everything started with us. And because of man's rebellion against Him, God turned away from the descendants of Ham and Japheth. Yet, He never gave up on them. God recognized man's sinfulness, and in order to save him, He made preparations for the ultimate sacrifice by focusing on one man, through whom all nations would be blessed. So as we come to a close, let us always remember that God still loves us and wants us all to live with Him. And this He proved by sacrificing His own Son to save us. But before mankind is blessed, God has chosen Abraham, the son of Terah, for a very important mission, and Abraham has no idea about it. So stay tuned and join us as we surprise Abraham and Sarai on their new role in the next episode of Through the Bible. God bless you.